Well, fellas, what do we have here? In case you didn't know, a poor young woman named Sarah Everard has been killed. They have a man arrested who they believe may have committed the crime, and it turns out he's a serving police officer. This hasn't been a good time for the boys in blue over the last couple of years. No doubt every job, every line of work, has individuals inside it that you would rather weren't given those responsibilities and authorities. However, this is especially problematic with the police force, as they are given authority over regular individuals, and they have force at hand to implement that with. The army, similarly, and other armed forces have the ability to utilize lethal force at their disposal, but mostly they don't do that on home territory. Usually their transgressions are done overseas, so the domestic populace doesn't really worry about them too much. In this case, it's looking, for the time being, as if we may have a problem on our hands. However, I don't think the problem is the one everyone thinks it is. Now, Sarah Everard apparently went to a friend's house during lockdown when there was a stay-at-home order initiated. I'm not implying that she caused her death, or that she's responsible for her death, or that she deserved her death. What I am willing to say, though, is because most people were adhering to the stay-at-home order, there was a lot less people around who would normally provide a kind of collective security. So to act in a normal way in these abnormal times may have, unfortunately for her, put her at higher risk. As I said, if you were walking home at night and there was nobody about, even a normal person would be more cautious, would be more worried about anything that could happen, man or woman. But during a time where people are mostly not going outside if they don't have to, there is implied an additional risk in engaging in these things. So while I don't blame her for her death, it does seem to be an unfortunate reminder that this is a changing situation, and that we need to understand that people who are opportunists and looking for the best environment with which to commit crimes are going to see this change in circumstance as a great opportunity for them. And maybe we need to be more conscious of that as well. I don't want to talk any more about Sarah Everard directly. I'm sure she was a lovely person. Some of the tributes being paid to her have been very moving. However, I'm not sure that all of the discussion and actions taken after her tragic loss are things that she would have approved of. It does appear that many people are pushing their political agendas while standing directly on her grave. And I have a real problem with this. There's been increasing discussions around women as a victim group following this attack. Now, last summer we had major problems with minorities being seen as victim groups, and there was civil unrest from that, and many people felt validated and authorized to actually make things a lot worse and commit serious crimes because of that situation. What I don't want to see is a repeat of that. It does appear now that while not just minorities, but also women specifically, are being painted as long-suffering victims, we're being pushed again into a new frontier of the blame game and a call for action. I'll just show you one of the posts I've seen recently. And there are many more I could refer to, and I may even read out some of the stuff that I've been looking at directly, but this one was sent to me, so let's have a look. So the line here says, "I don't know who needs to hear this, but to be clear, white people do not know more about racism than black or brown people. Equally, men don't get to question stories of the dangers of walking home as a girl or woman. Fall back, listen, learn, show empathy, show compassion. To begin with, the very last statement is absurd. I'm not going to follow your instructions or orders simply because you think you've just made a good case. That's not how it works." Secondly, we're going in reverse order. Let's look at the second statement. Men don't get to question the stories and dangers of walking home as a girl or woman. Why not? Why don't men get to question that? If you think men are the ones doing the attacks, surely you think men are in a prime position to see when there's an opportunity to do one. Now let's look at the first statement. I don't know who needs to hear this, but to be clear, white people do not know more about racism than black or brown people. black and brown people. I think that's quite a funny statement to be using about anti-racism, but okay. The fact that you think that a lived experience is the same as general knowledge is kind of absurd. In fact, you might think that you're arguing that these are two separate things, but then you go on to claim that no, one is clearly superior to the other. Okay? So if we deconstruct this statement, what's being said here is, white people may think they know something about racism. Again, the accusation is they're the one causing it. However, because they never experience it directly, how can they know anything about it? How can they know more than a person who does experience it? And what's really absurd here is, if we change the context and framing of the statement into a different subject, it loses all validity. It's only because it seems so socially meritorious to be able to say this out loud and get lots of people who feel obligated or feel empathetic to your indicated position, that you seem to be someone who's willing to stand up or willing to make a statement that is very appealing and appeasing to certain groups. That in itself is deserving of recognition. And I don't think it is. You see, this is the important thing to remember. Likes aren't votes. Likes are, for lack of a better explanation, likes are a representation of how entertaining you are. How entertaining, how amusing it is what you're doing. Alright? The reason people like things usually isn't out of valid and logical agreement. It's out of a desire and a feeling of positivity directed at your statement, directed at something you've done. Like comedy, right? You don't have to agree that the logic in comedy is sound, but if you enjoy it, if it's entertaining to you, you'll like it. And in the same way, statements made online that garner a lot of vocal support and likes tend to actually simply be the most agreeable and self-serving statements. The ones that clearly just initiate some kind of an emotional response out of people that's broadly positive, regardless of their true validity. You know, how sound is that actual argument? And like I said, you can transform this from what seems to be pleasant and agreeable into something quite absurd very easily. Let's say we were talking about healthcare, for example, and it was easy to therefore say, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure you get lots of likes if you put this down, especially from certain groups who feel like they're let down by healthcare. But if you were to say, I don't know who needs to hear this, but to be clear, doctors do not know more about health than patients. Right? Think about that. Think about that for a moment. Sure, the doctor maybe doesn't know what the physical sensation of having some pathology or ailment is. Nevertheless, they are well versed in dealing with it and managing the problem and actually finding a solution. And that's what you actually want. You don't necessarily want people to simply empathize with you. You might want solutions. And this is why the problem is, so much of this internet traffic and what appears to be public consensus is driven by women, because it's all empathetic. It's all just directed at showing sympathy and not solving anything. The minute they actually want something solved, they unionize and appeal to men to do it, specifically white men. White men change this. White men change that. White men need to stop doing this. White men need to start doing that. All right? And so if we, and you could do this for a bunch of things. You go, I don't know who needs to hear this, but to be clear, drivers know more about a breakdown than mechanics do. All right? And again, the experience of your car breaking down actually might be more likely if you're not a mechanically minded individual, because you're not taking correct care of your car. So you might have physical experience that shows you what it's like to have a breakdown, for your car to break down. But that doesn't mean you understand the intricacy, the mechanical nature of the breakdown. That doesn't mean you know how to fix it. Again, the mechanic may never experience a breakdown because he looks after his vehicle and he knows about it. But you could then argue from this perspective, it's not a matter of knowing what works. It's about knowing what doesn't work. That's how you are validated as an expert and an authority. All right? If you know that your shit's broke, that means you're an expert. Whereas the person who keeps their things in good working order and can fix stuff, they're not really experts. Nevertheless, those are the people you're trying to pressure into to actually resolve the situation and the problem. And that's exactly what's going to happen here. Men don't get to question the stories of the dangers of walking home as a girl or woman. I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it is a different perspective. However, if you want to work on a tactical analysis of your journey home, I'm sure there's a lot of guys out there who can tell you a lot more than you can about what the real dangers are. All right? Your perception, you may think, gives you some sort of authority, makes you top of the hierarchy. But this is just spin. Right? You've convinced yourself that this is the case, and then you're turning around and asking other people to fix it without even giving them any G credit. All right? What you need to do, you need to start by acknowledging that experience and knowledge are two different things. You do not want to be telling your doctor how to treat you just because you know what things feel like. You can go in and say, my head hurts. It keeps hurting. It's been hurting for ages. I'm getting headaches. I'm blacking out. I want some certain drugs. I think these drugs are going to help me. The doctor may say, no, I think you should go get an MRI. I think we should take a CT scan of your head. I think there's other investigations to go on here. But you can turn around and say, no, you don't understand. I know what the experience is that I'm having. It's painful. I want the drugs now. I want drugs. I don't want tests. I want what I think is going to solve it, not what your education, quote unquote, is going to tell you I need. And these are real opinions people have. I've seen people talk this way about the healthcare system before, about how doctors are morons, doctors are idiots, doctors don't know what they're doing. And there's absolutely limitations to interventional medicine. I 100% understand that. However, the doctor does have, while he doesn't have the experience of your headaches, he still knows there's a correlation between headaches and some underlying pathology that should be investigated. And as much as you may want the drugs, what if the drugs that you're asking for, that you think, that'll reduce pain, that reduces the sensation of pain, and I'm having a sensation of pain, therefore I should have the drugs, you should give them to me. What if that drug is heroin? What if your advice to your doctor is, I'm having pain, I know heroin takes pain away, give me heroin. You're not in any position to tell me no. I'm the patient, I know what's actually going on and you don't. The doctor has every right in reality to go, listen, you may have heard things, you may even know things, maybe you've had heroin before, but that is not standard practice, and there are ramifications to taking heroin, even if it does alleviate your symptom. He will know that in fact it is better to evaluate the situation and try to remove the cause and not merely treat the symptom, and the experience you're having is a symptomatic experience. So if this person was to come and say, black and brown people know more than anybody else, that is a complete denial. Well, firstly, it's a denial of the information transaction theory. So the idea that information is only limited to certain people and can't be transacted in any way, it can't be exchanged, is kind of absurd. All right, if it's describable, if you're able to quantify that information, even if I have to neural map your mind to find out exactly what you're thinking, and then just copy that map onto somebody else, they can therefore have that information. The information is there, all right? So saying it's impossible to transfer it is putting some sort of sanctimonious rubbish on consciousness, on the concept of knowledge, on the concept of experience, all right? It's just not true. Equally, if you're looking for a way to simply validate this position that you're trying, elevate a position that you're trying to give people as a token of your generosity, right? Then you're not contributing to fixing the situation. You're just using it as a piece of opportunism for you to position yourself in a really positive light. All right, you're buying yourself cheaply, may I add, just by making a few posts. You think you're buying yourself like some sort of social congruence. Like people are now going to find you more agreeable, and they're going to think of you differently because of a few things you said. When the truth is, they just don't look at it deep enough to understand that what you're actually doing is really damaging. By propagating these ideas, and the last statement, right? Fall back, listen, learn, show empathy, show compassion. That's a thought-terminating statement. That's something to make you not challenge it. All right? It's there to say, whatever you say against this is actually your own fault. All right? It's presupposing that you lack something if you disagree, which is the most absurd of every part of this ridiculous polemic nonsense. The idea that to have a dissenting opinion, to have any diversity in your perspective, is essentially to be wrong. And these are coming from the same people who want to talk about their personal truth, who want to talk about how things are subjective. In a postmodernist world, it's all subjective. You can't really know it anyway. Yet they're speaking in absolutes. They're speaking in exclusionary language. All of this stuff here. But the truth of it is, it's acceptably exclusionary. These are the exclusions they know they're allowed to make. So they're totally internally inconsistent. It's all hypocrisy. And they're using this girl's death to justify it. They're standing on the girl's grave to peddle their ideological nonsense, and it's kind of gross. It's really unattractive. Girls, it's really unattractive. Listen, I'm a moron. I'm a piece of shit. I understand that. I don't care if people want to call me out on it. I don't care if people want to try and kill my reputation. It's fine, alright? I've got no reputation to begin with. I'm not going to die on this hill for you. I'm not going to just bend the knee because of these nonsense words. If you want me to bend the knee, the words you need to be targeting at me is pussy, alright? You need to be opening your legs. I'll bend the knee for that. I can directly see how that benefits me, and I can make that transaction. I can make that sacrifice from there and say, alright, that's fair. But just for the opportunity of appealing, right? I mean, because here's where everything comes together. For guys who seem to not view this in any way objectively, but just jump on the bandwagon, it's because the girls are saying it, right? These are all simp beta guys. They want to jump on the bandwagon and say, look how agreeable I am. Look how conformist I am. Isn't that exactly what you want? I'm giving you everything you want. These are all... They're posturing sexually by trying to look like they're in absolute congruence with this individual. Like there's no conflict whatsoever. Which isn't the natural order, right? There should be some conflict. You should stand up for yourself. If you are masculine, you should be able to be at least opposing some of this. But if you find yourself having to agree with it because you're so shit scared, you're pissing your pants because you worry that if you say something out of line, no one's going to fuck you anymore. No one's fucking you now. No one's fucking your beta coward cock now. No one is fucking getting on that because you're not a man. You got no masculine traits. Oh, you want to go out and make a big posture about how you'll defend this person's statements and how that poor girl died and you're coming out and you're defending her. Nobody's attacking the girl. They're attacking the nonsense you're peddling while standing on her grave. But you're using that grave as a shield to protect your ridiculous ideology. It's so embarrassing. It's so embarrassing. And this is the news today. The news today is the history of tomorrow. It's a stupid platitude, but it's totally accurate. When you want to learn about the history, you go back and you start looking, what were people saying back then? What were the big stories, right? This is the news today. And this is what people are going to think of when they look in our history. And we're like retconning it as it happens. Nothing we talk about is real. Nothing on the internet is real. It's all bullshit. And when people look back and try and find out anything about us, they'll know that the only thing they'll know is there was no honesty. Hopefully, after the collapse, they'll look back and say, that was a big problem. We have to avoid that in the future. Undoubtedly, we'll come back to this point at some point in the future as well, and where everything's comfy and now we can be more feminine and we can delude ourselves in all kinds of ways that we think is an advantageous posture to take. Alright, lads, it goes on. This is one, like I said earlier, I saw myself, and I kind of can't believe people are defending this. Alright, again, it's not the content that matters. Alright, if you have to analyze the argument itself, it's totally flawed and ridiculous. It's all about the context. It's about the subjects they're discussing. That's all that they want. The people who post this rubbish only want the safety of knowing that everybody agrees with their general stance. Right, I'm signaling a certain stance. I'm on this side. I want to share on this side, but I want to add on in some way where it seems like I've got new information. I've got something I'm offering. Just show your support for me. Don't worry too much about the details. Okay? And this is why it's kind of so funny in a way. Is I thought when I first saw this that this was a parody. I 100% thought this was satire. I literally accused the person who put it up of making a bad joke, a joke in bad taste. And they were totally defending it, saying, no, you just don't understand women's problems. You have no right to be critical of this. And that's when I realized, I was like, okay, this is... I hope this is actually a trap that somebody's fallen into to just expose them a little bit to realizing the problem. That all they're doing is looking for these personally, like, self-serving stances that symbolize their apparent generosity and an apparent virtue, when in truth it's like I said, self-serving. It's all absolute opportunism. They're just looking for any time they can shit on somebody who's acceptable to shit on, and get praise for supporting people who there is a perception that they need support. And that's why I'm not going to go on about the white guy thing anymore. But really, it's always the acceptable attack is on white guys, and you're about to see this. All right. Okay, so as we go, let me go back. As humans, we generalize things. For example, we say it's in green as well. Let's go. That means good. For example, we say, be careful of ticks. They might carry Lyme's disease. All right. And then the next one is, oh, but here's the logic part, right? No one says, actually, not all ticks carry Lyme disease, because logically we all understand that enough ticks carry Lyme disease to put you at risk of being infected. By the way, the person I commented on this saying, I think this is a joke, they have since taken the post down. So I think someone who was authorized to tell them this isn't okay came to them after I did, and then they were like, oh, maybe it is. I won't get an apology from that person. That person's going to turn around and tell me, oh, actually they were wrong, because I'm not somebody, again, I'm not preordained to have that information. I'm not preordained to be telling people what to do, because I'm a white guy. It's not allowed. It's exactly the same argument from earlier. They only bend the knee now. They're only going to bend the knee to minorities. That's it. Because they're such victim groups that by showing how humble they are, it's a representation of their nobility, how humble they can be in front of these downtrodden people, these victimized people, how they're signaling that they're not the problem, but they're not actually making any solutions. They're not making anything better. They're absolute opportunists, just using the opportunity they've been presented with to try and gain some sort of social advantage. They're looking to be looked at by other people in a specific way, and that's their only interest, really. There are very few absolute altruists in this whole situation, and the few of them that are probably end up speaking a lot like me, because they realize that the end benefit, the end goal, the real thing that you want to be doing to help people is take the flack, take the fucking criticism, take all the shit, and hopefully at least put the thought in their mind that they're being lied to, that there's something not right, and that finding real solutions is what you want instead of just looking good. Anyway, back to the fucking meme. No one says, actually not all. Yeah, because logically we all understand that enough ticks carry Lyme disease to put you at risk of being infected. When we speak up about women's oppression and abuse, obviously we know it's not all men. Well, that's very, very kind of them, thank you. But 1 in 3 women are assaulted by a man in their lifetime. It's enough to make all women afraid. No stats given for that fact there. Absolutely nothing to validate that. No evidence provided. Just thrown out this random stat. Fine. Alright. And then you can see all the women are in red. Oh, it's not very pleasant. And only 1 of the men is in red, but they all look very unimpressed. It's enough men that when I'm walking home alone at night, I have to assume it's all men to keep myself safe. Do you see where I'm going with this now? I mean, to be honest, when I was reading it the first time, I saw it by the second slide that it was absurd. And I knew that the parallels that were going to be made to this argument and other arguments that they dismiss out of hand. But the fact that some people are now legitimately abiding by these arguments is hilarious to me. Anyway, link to. Just like I have to act as though all ticks have Lyme disease. Ticks do have Lyme disease, by the way. Don't get bitten. When you make our abuse about you, it doesn't help anyone. Not all men. We know it's not all men, but it's enough men to keep us in a constant state of fear. And then there's some stuff at the bottom. Again, I have to go to this person's profile and take a look, see if she is just a really good troll. But you know already what I'm going to say, right? Like, this is the same argument people who are in favour of segregation make. This is the same argument. Like, they think, from the evidence, from the statistics, they think that the black community has a problem with crime. It has a crime problem. And therefore, when they see black people, they associate it with crime. And that person threatens them, they feel threatened, they feel unsafe, and that affects their behaviours. Now, the community which supports this message that we're looking at would call those people racists. They would say, if your belief about black people is changing how you treat them in a way that is hostile or negative in any way, anything but supportive, you are a racist. But in this context, right, again, like I said, the content doesn't matter. It's all about the context. Everything is to do with who's the subject, who's the villain, who's the hero. How can I portray this to show my position as being well socially aligned to things like, humbleness and generosity and empathy and shit like this. Yeah, and so exactly the same situation. Not all black people commit crime. However, enough of them commit crime that you can be concerned when you see a black person. So don't blame me if I avoid you as a black person, because enough of them commit crime that I need to be wary of it. And when you make my concern about crime about you, about your not wanting to be treated in a racist way, that doesn't help anyone. That's not helping anyone. You're making this all about racism. Really isn't helping bring crime down, is it? And in a strange way, it's an almost valid argument, but it's an argument they would hate. The people going on about this from her perspective, right? From the person who posts this perspective. I just want to laugh, right? I want to say how hysterical and ridiculous this is. Not her specifically. I see her point. She's laser focused on talking about the pain that she's been through. My problem is she's using vocabulary that is not correctly assigned to her experience, to what she's describing and to what she's trying to convey. And when she does that, just like with the last example, with using the word like experience to say, you know, black and brown people have authority in certain situations because of the things they've gone through. In the same way, I'm trying to tell her, listen, you're speaking about your personal experience, which is fine, but no one else at the moment, from what you've said, like, you're not expressing what that experience was. It's a totally vacuous and nebulous concept you're giving me. And I know you don't want to talk about it. I know you don't want it to be seen in any other way than the extreme terms which you're using. And therefore, you can't provide any more information on it, because if you did, that may offer up the opportunity to view it in a different interpretation. And so because you don't want that, you're censoring any information about it, and instead of pushing what happened, you're just pushing your version. You're just pushing the after effect, the aftermath on you personally, and having that be all the information that's available about the experience itself or whatever happened. Oh, and then you're plastering it on to everyone else's experience to say they're all valid and justified because of how I feel about what happened to me. But again, you can't function in that way. You can't go on about how you feel about a situation as if it's some sort of diagnostic that tells you something about it. Your subjective experience about what has happened is informative to you and your character and your makeup and how you go on to deal and process that. But it doesn't convey to anyone else what actually has transpired. And therefore, to speak about these nebulous terms and to speak about your perceived experience and to tell me the emotions surrounding what's happened, but not to give me any information about what happened, and then tell me to act on those emotions, how can I? How can I do so while having any sense of responsibility and obligation? Because as much as I have an obligation perhaps to you as a friend to try to alleviate some of that suffering you've had, I can't very well go around increasing other people's suffering on your word, right? I can't go out inconveniencing people. How am I supposed to change the world for you, shape the world better for you, based solely on your emotions? Based solely on just your interpretation of what's happened and not at least some foundational evidence that something can be changed. How are we supposed to go about changing it? Tell me. If you're just going to tell me, like, what you need to do is now this because I felt this way. What if I do that back to you? What if I say, listen, I'm feeling this way, you're not obligated to do this. You're not obligated to do this about my feelings. How selfish would you accuse me of being that my wants and desires are totally overriding anything that you think you're allowed to do? I want this, I feel this way. That should override any other priority you have. Any other reason, any other rationale is secondary to the fact that I feel a certain way. If that's the way we're going to go, I don't see a way out for us as a species. We have to interact with reality in meaningful ways. And our emotions are not a reflection of reality. They're a reflection of our characters. Experience and knowledge, reality and character. It's the same difference. But let's go on. Let's look at a final thing here. So this was in response. We have a House of Lords in our country, so there's two houses that represent the people, that are legislative houses. One of them is the House of Commons. Sorry, that's more about the people. The other one is the House of Lords, which you're selected for, right? You're not voted into it by the populace. You're selected for it from usually party donors. However, it used to be, I suppose, people who were experts in the field they were in, so they had like specialist technical knowledge, and they were able to supply like a genuine service on legislation. They were able to understand the intricacies where perhaps the politicians didn't. And this person in the House of Lords has come forward and said, Baroness Jones, she suggests a 6 p.m. curfew for men. Now, I'll be honest, I don't see how that could fly. I don't see how they could implement that. Additionally, we're already in a lockdown situation, so a curfew is kind of meaningless. It doesn't add any additional restrictions, right? We're already restricted in this way unless we have to do something. I'm sure a curfew would also allow you to do stuff if you needed to. And also, I don't see how this would fly in the face of social justice, because there would be groups that would plead some kind of exemption to this. All right, like they were being. It's not like specifically they were being prejudiced, but however, I mean, we had this during the lockdown. People were saying, "Oh, white people live in the suburbs. They have gardens. Lockdown for them isn't that hard because they can still go outside. Black people live in the cities, in the urban areas. They don't have gardens. Lockdown's worse on them. They shouldn't be locked down as much." And I'm sure the same thing would happen here, right? Like, you would then have a situation where really, okay, all men who live in the suburbs. That's okay. So men from non-minority communities. 6 p.m. curfew. And that would make some sense, right? Because the guy who's accused of doing this murder, he was a white guy. So I don't see how they'd be able to strongly argue against that on those grounds. But here's the thing, right? What happens when the curfew doesn't work? What happens when the fact there are no guys around anymore means that the predatory ones who aren't following the rules anyway now realise, damn, outside all there is girls. Who's going to stop me? Who's going to stop me doing whatever I want? There's no chance of like a bigger guy passing by randomly and seeing what I'm up to and taking, and preventing me from doing something, making the risk too high. Now it's just girls out there. And it's not like we have a Bobby on every street corner. There are a lot of places that simply aren't policed very well, or they have very low policing, usually from like less requirement to police, but also because of limited police numbers. And so, let's say, for argument's sake, they impose the curfew, and then we go a month through it, 2-3 months through it, and actually the numbers of sexual assaults are higher. All right, the numbers of sexual assaults are higher. I'd also say maybe there become a reporting difference now, because there would be basically less witnesses, so the ability to report would be much more controversial. It would be a he said she said thing in many more situations than it is now. There'd be more opportunities for very 50-50 cases in which more than likely. Like, how would you then begin to police that? Like I said, they probably wouldn't end up being investigated because there would be so many and so little evidence to collect. How could you begin to build cases? All right, so let's say they institute it, and 2-3 months down the line, rapes are actually up, right? Abuse and violence towards women is up. What do they do then? Would they undo it? Would they remove the curfew? I seriously doubt it. In the situation we're in now, I think people would begin to lobby for an expansive curfew, all right? So, breaking news, the 6 p.m. curfew, breaking news, rape numbers, highest level ever. 6 p.m. curfew to be increased to 3 p.m. and expanded to not just men, but all males above 8 years old, right? So, like, can you imagine? There would be no way back. It would just be, stop doing this. We're not doing it. But it's getting worse, so you must be doing something. We're going to continue to penalise you. We're going to make it harder on you. Clearly, that's the only... Like, our ability to engage with evidence and form rational conclusions now is so bad. I could absolutely see the vocal minority, some public support for the curfew isn't working, things are getting worse, do more. Do more. And then the politicians going, oh shit, we better do more. Increase the curfew, make sure it covers more people. Like, where would it end? The more they feel like they have to do something, the worse it gets. Now, this Baroness went on to say that actually this was all just a point. She was just making a point that women are told to do things in one way, but men would never suffer them to be told it themselves. And I'm in agreement with her. I'm absolutely in agreement with her. Men are trash. If trash is everywhere, no one gives a shit. Women are much rarer, much more valuable. It's like gold. right? No one is saying lock up your trash, because no one gives a shit about trash. No one gives a shit about men. But you should lock up your gold, otherwise someone will fucking take it. It won't be yours anymore. They'll do what they want with it. I know we're all equal, but what you have to get through your heads is we have different abilities. We view the world differently. Our backgrounds are totally different. The things that drive us are different. We're both alive. We're both living beings. We deserve, we're entitled, we have rights. Okay, these are all conceptual, but still I somewhat agree with them in principle. But it's not a good comparison to make. To say that men get upset when they're spoken about this way. Because men understand that women have something valuable and men don't. Men are driven to reproduce. The reproduction actually isn't the drive. I mean, it's the copulation that's the drive. They just want to have the access, the opportunity. That's as far as the hormones really drives them. The purpose is reproduction, but the hormones don't tell you what the purpose is. They just drive you to do certain things. Now, there's some people that obviously have developmental issues or don't understand their biology, or something's gone genuinely wrong with them and they're ill, or they just don't care, right? There's psychological problems. Now, all these people, there is things out of balance and they're going to act contrary to what's beneficial to the society, but most people will act beneficially towards the society, right? So when you see that's the purpose and the cause, and these are the mechanisms, then you have to understand that no one gives a shit about the trash, and we know it. So the fact that we're out there, and then you start saying, lock up your trash, people are going to go, what the fuck are you talking about? What the fuck are you talking about? Alright. I think I've spoken for well long enough on this, and hopefully we'll see how it goes. But thank you very much for sticking with me, lads. I appreciate it. I hope there was something about this that you found interesting. I know I'm getting a lot of flack, but I accept it. Alright, and the people giving me flack, I accept where you're coming from. I do. This is a great opportunity to show just how nice people you are, right? I said some things that didn't sound very pleasing. I said things that we'd rather not think. And because I said them, attacking me and going for me is almost the same as removing them, right? If I just stopped talking about them, they wouldn't be real anymore. And I wish you the best with that. If it was that easy to solve, man, that would be fucking so good. The world would be great. But that's not what I've seen. And that's not the way it goes. But you crack on. You keep going. You might make it, right? There is a chance you could do it. All the best to you. All the best to my fans. All the best to everyone out there who gets through these with me and is going through this time. And, you know, girls, if you are listening, I hope you understand this really wasn't against you. A lot of this is kind of trying to produce a better world. It's trying to make sense of the bullshit that we're in and sort it out before this tangle fucks everything up. And I get that you have social maneuvers to make to secure your position. It's a biological drive for you. I don't hate you for it. But hopefully we can sort this out so that you get rewarded for doing the right things, the things that actually help society, rather than the short-term benefits of a bit of social clout that you get just by saying the things that are easy to agree with and that people just wanna believe. Who knows? All right. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you around.